Yeah, lean back a little bit. Yeah,
Hey, so today's episode it's about the Nazca Lines, as you can tell from Bharat's background.
yeah.
And in my background, I have someone working on the ground here. It's someone called Maria Reiche. She's right there.
Are you sure that's her?
Yeah, man. She's working. We're gonna talk about her. We're gonna talk about what these lines mean to us Peruvians and what do they might mean for the rest of the world. My
Mhm.
dad, he was like, "Hey, you need to know about Maria Rage. She's amazing. She's coming here. She's doing all this work." And I think that he was picturing her like alone in the desert, like with a little brush, like me coming back from Peru, right? He was like, "Hey, don't forget your brush." He gave me a brush, so I have a brush here in my apartment. Ta-da! Here's the.
I think we balance things very well here.
Yeah, yep, agree.
When was the first time you heard about the Nazca Lines?
When you mentioned it, I didn't know that they're called Nazca Lines. I've definitely seen it before.
Okay.
Just thought that these are, interesting lines in some random desert. I didn't even know that they were in Peru. And when you said, "Oh, yeah, let's talk about the Nazca lines," I'm like, "What are the Nazca lines?" So I looked it up and I'm like, "Oh wow, these are really cool. Oh wow, they're really like huge. They span like tens and hundreds of meters and maybe like what some even go for kilometers." I was just fascinated and like, "Ooh, there what are these figures, structures that and what's its importance? Who did this?
Yeah.
And why is it in a desert?" All these questions were kind of popping up.
This is something that I've learned when I was a kid, right? We see this in school, in primary school, middle school, high school, and it's always mesmerizing to me how when I was a kid, and many people, many kids in my class, they will just, say like, "Cool, we have these lines in a desert that is kind of like 4 hours from where we live. Cool, you know, interesting." But now in hindsight, you're like, "Wow, like this is something that you will not find in any other part of the world." And then you think about why did they make these lines? What was the reason behind the lines? And what we were told, I think, when I was a kid, if I'm not mistaken, sorry to my primary school teacher if I'm wrong, but I think that I was told that it was linked to religious ceremonies, or like, it had this special astronomical relevancy. I would say that it was a very simplified explanation for us. We were just like 9 years old, 10-year-old kids. So I wonder, right, how many things we have learned throughout the years about these lines. Until this day, they remain a mystery. Maybe these lines were like a calendar, or they were used for some rituals or some religious
Spiritual
ceremony.
purposes, yeah,
Exactly.
religious.
Or maybe they were linked to the stars.
These lines remind me of another Indian connection. There's a story, Ramayana, where Sugriva happened to mention a trident in Patalaloka, or in a land that is distant, and I guess they have to travel through Patalaloka. Now, for those that are not familiar, Patalaloka is translated to like underground, underworld, that kind of thing. And this trident is in Peru, right? Which is on the other side of India. And one way is to like fly across and, land here. Another way is also go through underground tunnels of sorts and, underground pathway. So I guess, because Earth is circular, globular in nature, and if one were to go underground from India and then they were going to the other side, right, or coming out from the other side, then they could come from this side, which would be like, I guess, Peru. There is a theory, a
Mhm.
shocking theory, if you must.
Okay.
It said that the geometric lines could act as movement paths to induce trance states.
Oh,
You know, and which is not too far fetched because ceremonies of and certain rituals where there's movements, dance,
yeah.
like around like the bonfire and stuff like that, like where people that they get into these trance states, they're dancing to get into these trance states, or they dance when they touch that uh, trance state or altered state of consciousness, so to speak.
Yeah, I mean, it will be so amazing, right? If we can imagine, if we can picture people from, back then walking along all these lines, right? All these Nazca lines. If maybe they did that, right?
Hmm.
To either make them or to preserve them, or if that was part of the ritual, right? Who knows?
Yeah.
Maybe part of the ritual was to, once the lines were done, you had to walk along those lines,
Mm.
you know, like literally walking along the line.
When I saw that these are some figures, I'm
Yeah,
like, only humans can make this, right? Um,
sure.
because seems like
Yeah, that's such a human thing.
human thing. Like we just love doodling, man. So
Yeah,
this is like a next level of doodling, and
exactly.
or sculpting, or what is that called? Where you're uh landscaping, I guess.
Okay.
So yeah, this is that. I mean, and then when I realized like they're spread across like hundreds and thousands of kilometers, I'm like,
Mhm.
whoa, that's intense. This is some serious landscaping and
Yeah.
serious, you know, Zen gardening of a sort.
When I first saw the lines, I was like, okay, so they put some white stuff on the ground to demarcate the lines, I guess. So I was
Mm.
like, yeah, because they look like white lines to
Yeah,
me.
that's true. Yeah.
But then I realized that is actually uh, something intentional. Like when they were trying to edit the pictures to show to the masses, they were just trying to trace the lines as white so you can have an idea of how it really looks like. But if
Mm.
you see them from above, they're not white.
Yeah,
It's
they're not as visible, right?
yeah, they're not as visible as, you have in your background. So in my head, when I was a kid, right, the first thing I thought is, oh wow, so they put some like white ashes or something, to just make all these white lines, and they
Mm.
look so nice and so perfect. So maybe they were just like walking and putting all this white ashes, to just trace all those lines. So that was my first thought as a kid. And then I was like, wait, it's a desert. So there's a lot of wind. So how did they make this stick in the ground? And I didn't think about it because maybe I saw some ice cream next to me. I was like, okay, let's have some ice cream. And I
Okay.
just go every day. But, that was my first thought. I don't know if you had something similar in mind.
Yeah. I I couldn't imagine or picture like just the the scale of the drawings, so to speak. And they're not really drawings, right? Like uh, they're I'm thinking more like carvings or but how they did it is like they're exposing they're removing a part of the earth or the floor, the desert floor, right? And
Mm,
yeah, I'm glad you mentioned that like it's not like a chalk or like something that they've put, and you can't really just visualize it. You know that there's some sort of lines and curves,
yeah,
but until like you say, oh, this is a particular region where there is the spider lines, and then now you have some sort of reference, and then you could look and be like, oh yeah, 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 I see it. And that's how you could appreciate it. So I and when I saw the pictures of it, like when I googled it, and now that I see uh to compare, it makes sense. But otherwise it would have been hard to appreciate because of how it's done.
yeah,
I like, although I like them all, my favorite is probably like the monkey, just
yeah.
because I don't know, monkeys are cool, man.
That's true. That's true. And you have monkey god in your culture, right?
Yep. You know what? That's my bias, bro. I like it because of the monkey god.
Can you talk about a monkey god for like 10 seconds?
It's too short to mention. Monkey god, his name is Hanuman. That's one of the names that are he's known by.
Yeah.
He's part of the epic called Ramayan.
Mm,
He's known for his strength, his agility, his knowledge, and a lot of superpowers. He could become as tiny as an ant, or even maybe even smaller than that, and as huge as like a mountain, so to speak.
wow.
And yeah, and he's a symbol of devotion. He's a symbol of dedication, perseverance, strength.
Yes. So apparently they were created like roughly 500 years before Christ. Um, and this were, made by or built by the Nazca culture.
Mhm.
So they made these lines. Um, and of course, people that were living around those areas or these areas, they did know about the lines all along. It's just that it took some time for the whole world to know about these lines, including other parts of Peru. Like, in Lima, we didn't know about these lines because, it's just something that it was only for locals. So there are some, early Spanish chroniclers that have mentioned some strange markings in the desert, but they never did understand what they were. So maybe there are some reports back in the 16th century, but they were just being reported as weird, strange markings on the ground. Um, but it was not until at least 1920s where we had this Peruvian archaeologist called Toribio Mejia that noticed long lines while he was hiking in the desert. So he might have been one of the first people that was not a local to maybe have, witnessed the presence of these lines. So probably the wow moment happened around the 1930s, because that's when some commercial pilots were able to fly over the desert and they saw these huge shapes of animals, plants, and all these figures, right? So that was from the air. And suddenly, it was not just a line, it was a whole figure. So they made sense. And
Mm,
they were described as these four giant drawings, like hummingbird, the monkey, the spider that we talk about, right?
mm,
It was not until the 1940s. that we had the presence of the amazing, the incredible, the extraordinary archaeologist, German mathematician, Maria Reiche.
Shout out to
And
Maria Reiche.
shout out to her, shout out to her family, shout out to her. She she changed the whole game here. Um, and I think that she dedicated her whole life to studying and preserving these lines. And we just have so much to thank to her. She's right there.
Are you sure that's her?
Yeah, man. She's working. She's not
Okay.
gonna be wearing a gown.
Okay.
Okay, maybe that's not her. Okay.
It doesn't look anything like.
Bro, you are not the Peruvian here. I made the rules. But if I want to use this as my background and say that that's Maria Rachel working, I'm gonna do it.
And she did live until like 1990 something. And then if she was
No,
working in that area and she did have some gown or something there, like that's probably her. So yeah, my bad.
no, I mean, but what do you think about it, right? I mean, like you said, she worked, from the 1940s to the 1990s.
Mhm.
Like she dedicated 50 years of her life uh working on these lines.
Yeah, that is huge. Much respect to Maria Reich. Um, you know, when she discovered and was working on these Nazca lines, like in the other part of the world, another group of because she's you mentioned did you mention that she's German? So Maria
Yeah,
Reich,
she's a German mathematician. Yeah, I
right?
said that.
Yeah. So when this wonderful lady, you know, was working and dedicating her life here, in contrast to someone else that's on the other part of the world, and they were causing a whole, they're causing a lot of
Dispute.
chaos, um, havoc around, around that time, that 1939 to 1945, those years. And here she's, another German, doing work of God, dedicating her life to preserving something that means a lot to the local.
She's amazing. She mapped many of the figures. She helped bring in international attention to all these figures. And the UNESCO now has recognized this these lines, right,
Yeah,
as a World Heritage Site.
yeah.
And a very interesting thing is that some people believe, Barath, this was meant to be. Like, you know, we talk about all this religious and all this spiritual aspect behind the lines. And
Mhm.
maybe that's true. Did you know that while she was working on these lines, she discovered a pattern um, that it's called, that we're going to mention just in a bit. Uh, but before she discovered this pattern, there was something that happened. She cut one of her fingers on the right hand, if I'm not wrong. So then she was working on the lines and she was like, hey, look at the chick. And then she was like, hey, on the left leg, you can only see 5 toes, but on the right one,
Really?
and 4, actually,
Yeah, yeah.
just like Maria Rage, just like her, after she
What?
cut her finger.
So she lost a finger?
Yes. And that 5-4 pattern is something that you might see also on the wings and other figures as well.
Wow.
Yeah.
Whoa. That's
So Was it meant to be?
Wow. Wow. That's some coincidence.
Yeah.
Mhm.
My dad, he was like, "Hey, you need to know about Maria Reiche. She's amazing. She's coming here. She's doing all this work." And I think that he was picturing her like alone in the desert, like with a little brush, like. And my dad used to also buy little brushes that you're supposed to use for like painting, no for like, you know, I don't know, putting some dirt out of the house. It's just like he does that. And, me coming back from Peru, right? He was like, "Hey, don't forget your brush." He gave me a brush. So I have a brush here in my apartment.
Do you have that brush?
Here's the.
Bro. Oh my god. This if we were to sell merch, I think this brush will be one of them.
Yes. You might need
Yeah.
a brush. You don't know it.
Yeah. Yeah, we might need it,
But that's
to
the
clean
story.
desk and stuff like. Now that I think about it, I feel like this Nazca line might
Yeah.
be dedicated to your dad, dude. And this
I think we balance things very well here.
Yeah, yep, I agree.
Yeah. I mean, we are in the comedy category.
Yeah,
So
you're definitely justifying that part
perfect.
for sure.
Yeah. Um, so what do you think about why these lines were made? Like, why do you think the locals or the people that were, part of the Nazca culture back then,
Yeah.
why do you think they had in mind? What was the reason they were doing that from your end?
Yeah. So seems like, like a lot of indigenous cultures, they're very close to nature. And,
Mm.
since these are in desert itself, uh, they're I don't know how or where they would even see monkeys. Like, are there desert monkeys? I don't know, but
Nope, that no.
seems like they still have knowledge of like these other creatures that are not necessarily part of that particular region. Spider makes sense. Like there might be some desert spiders, like, but monkeys, I don't know. And I think one of the lines even had like a whale. Like, where do you find whales in a desert, right? Like it's so far from it. Is there an ocean nearby?
Hmm.
I don't know, but seems like these are actually symbols for something deeper. And if a culture takes that much effort to make symbols that stretch for kilometers in a desert, then they definitely mean something for them. Um and that I don't think is deniable, right? It means a lot for these people.
Yeah, that's true. The first thing that I thought is similar to you. This has to mean something else. And then the question comes up, right? Why making big figures that can be only seen from above?
Right. Yeah.
Why?
The only thing that makes sense is, like a landing page wanting to attract some sort of higher power, higher plane stuff, like aliens or
Ooh,
higher dimensional beings that are
yeah,
only, I don't know.
because you make all these figures, but you are not gonna be able to appreciate them.
Yeah.
Oh, no, what was the sound? But you are not gonna be able to appreciate them, you know, because you can not get to see them as you would see, I don't know, some craving on this stone, whatever. So
Carving.
yeah, it's so interesting. Why would you like to make all these lines that big if you are not gonna enjoy them in your daily?
Right.
Hmm.
Yeah. I yeah, it's very interesting.
At the same time, I didn't find surprising that most of them were animals because I think that this is something that comes, in a lot of cultures that
Mhm.
they do see all these animals as gods or like as, respectful beings.
Yeah,
And in some sort of way, they would like to honor them.
yeah,
Either it's a statue or, whatever. But in this case, that's why I was like, okay, animals. I don't find that amusing. Kind of like expected. But
mhm,
some of these figures are not animals.
yeah.
Um, some of them, and again, you don't have all of them in your background. They're like now over 300.
300, right?
Like it's amazing. And that's like a very recent discovery that there's so many of them. And the reason why we know more about these lines is because now with AI, we're able to decode all these marks and tracings and kind of like see how we can also find even more figures on Earth thanks to all these new technologies. But what I'm
Mhm.
trying to say here is yeah, there's some animals, but there's some other figures that it's hard to tell what they would mean. Some of them might represent battles or like some important parts of maybe history for them. But yeah, um, I don't know what you think, but when I saw that most of them were animals, I was like, sure.
Yeah, makes sense. Definitely, I'm surprised there's no sun or moon because usually, like,
Yeah,
that's maybe there is, but I don't know.
maybe there is. Yeah, we can Google it up to
I
see, but
haven't
yeah,
seen.
I haven't seen.
Yeah, maybe they're somehow represented because I mean, there's over 300 as you said, right? So
Yeah.
I wouldn't be surprised. And
So the most, oh yeah, go ahead.
yeah, m- they're always like including this in rituals and storytelling and
Yeah.
all these things. So,
So yeah, the most famous theories about this Nazca lines, right? We have, for instance, the astronomical calendar theory that
mhm,
says that these lines were one of the earliest uh, calendars that the humankind have ever made. You know,
mhm,
um, and this idea was supported by Maria Reiche. Actually, um, it's that's what I think I was reading. Um, Apparently, is that the lines were used as giant astronomical calendars, and some
mhm.
lines appeared to align with the sun during solstices,
Mhm.
and
And also
others
those
made,
stars.
yeah, was that
And also like solstices and stars.
right? So others may point towards certain stars, as you mentioned, or constellations.
Mhm.
And the Nazca people could have used them to track all the seasons for agriculture, right? So that is something that I have seen in other cultures as well. So it doesn't seem to be very, crazy.
Yeah.
Um, so other theories might include a religious aspect, as we talked before, like rituals, pathways, in some sort of way. So this is one of the most accepted theories that we have because I think that we have seen this pattern of spirituality and religious purposes repeated in other cultures as well. So
Mhm.
these lines might have been paths that people walked along during ceremonies. And we have these large shapes of animals and figures that could have had symbolic or spiritual meaning to the
Yeah.
people. The Nazca culture actually strongly believe in rituals that were connected to nature. So this might have been one of them.
Mm.
There is some evidence of footprints um, and wear patterns that suggest people could have actually walked on these lines. So
Mm.
that's why this is something that it's been considered as one of the most feasible theories.
Mm.
Yeah. Also, as I think you mentioned, the water reason, right? How like a
Mhm.
source of water Yeah, so there is this other theory that talks about these lines being used for water and fertility rituals, right? They basically mention that, yeah, the water is scarce in the desert, right? So they would like to maybe uh, kind of like summon water for them. And so
Mm.
many lines point toward underground water sources that I think we have, been told as kids that this are called pukios. Okay. And the figures might represent rain, fertility, or water related deities. And this, could have included some ceremonies on the lines that could have meant, asking for rain, um, to get some water in the desert. So
Mhm.
because water is critical for surviving, would make sense that they would just like to connect to, you know, the sky and the clouds and make all these big figures that maybe the clouds could see, maybe the sky could see, so they can have the rain from them, you know?
Yeah,
So, yeah.
that makes sense. And you know that this story, when you were talking about like the water reservoirs, in a way, it was kind of reminding me of a place in India. So there is a s- an almost like bunch of stairs that were going into the ground. Okay, and and as the stairs descend, ultimately you reach a place where there's water.
Hmm.
You know, and this is a temple of a sort, right? And when usually it's not uncommon for
Mm.
water to be near a temple, for
Right.
bathing purposes and cleansing and so on and so forth and different
Yeah.
rituals. That's not uncommon. But this particular temple that I'm talking about is peculiar in the sense that this temple itself, like what's sacred about it is it's for water.
Yeah.
Usually the structures, the deities, the different symbols, representation of God, that would be in the main sanctum sanctorum, in the
Mm.
very midst of for one to go and pray, offer their respects,
Right.
uh, offerings. That would They would go to the main temple, and there would be the statue, the idol, that one would pray to. But at this place that I'm talking about, when one would descend, this these idols are around the periphery, and they're not like the main, I guess, the main focus, but the water is making, symbolizing that this is the most sacred thing uh, for our survival. So that's just a parallel that I thought I'd connect.
So let's talk about how what are these lines, right? Like it's not chalk,
What
it's
are
not
these
ashes.
lines?
It's not chalk, it's not ashes. It's not white ashes.
Mhm.
So what is this? You know?
What are these lines? What are
What are
these
these
lines?
lines? Yeah, what are these lines? So
What
from
are
what
those
I
lines?
right. Anything else?
Water, get it? Water, those lines.
But what are these lines? So um apparently, people were working on these lines. Like I said, they were not drawn or like did not use any paint or chalk. Um, and it was not ashes because my dad would have brushed them off easily. So what happens is that apparently they use a lot of methods to work on these lines. Um, they have what I was reading is that they use this removing rocks method.
Mm.
Um, like very clever but very simple technique as well. So the desert surface is covered with dark reddish stones.
Yeah.
Um, and underneath, the soil is, much lighter, right? Almost whitish or like yellowish.
Mhm.
So basically, they created all these lines by removing all these dark stones and exposing the lighter ground underneath.
Yeah.
Apparently, that's how they did it. And if you go to see all the lines, what people that have seen these lines like almost face to face, they report that it's like you can see the lines like a little depression on
Mhm.
Earth, which makes sense, right? Because they were removing the surface part of the desert. So, yeah, people say it's like you see that there's a depression there that is tracing all these lines.
Mhm.
So, that's basically how they did it.
I wonder how deep they are.
Yeah, they say it's not that deep. Um,
Like few
what
inches?
is like few inches apparently.
Oh, really?
Um, could Google it up too.
Yeah.
Um, but yeah, maybe the Nazca culture was very chill. It was like, bro, it's not that deep. You
It's not that deep.
know? You just love hummingbirds
Yeah. Right. And monkey.
and and ticks and all that. Typical depth, usually about 10 to 15 centimeters, which is 4 to 6 inches.
About that deep.
Yeah. So apparently the lines were like 4 to 6 inches, um, not too deep.
Not too deep.
Um, and people are like, why they're so shallow? And well, the Nazca people only removed the top layer of the dark stones that were on
Mm,
desert, and
yeah.
they exposed the lighter soil underneath. So you would not expect that to be that deep, you know?
Mm, yeah.
It's more like brushing away gravel to reveal a different color than digging a deep hole, basically.
Mm,
Did I say right?
right. Right. But they also did dig deep. The what was that? Water reservoir called Pucos?
Pukios.
Pukios. Yeah. But that was just for like storage of or for water reservoir, right?
Yeah, yeah, yeah. So apparently, this theory was saying that there were many lines pointing uh, toward underground water sources. Um, and the figures might represent rain and fertility and
Mm,
water deities, and they will do all these ceremonies.
mm,
But they were having this notion of, yeah, there's water underneath. You know what? It's so interesting because if you think about this, the Incas or the cultures, they had their own vision of religion and how things worked, right?
mhm,
And we don't say this as, our Nazcaism, you know, in our Nazcaism culture, or we don't have that, but actually we do.
mm,
What I'm trying to say here is that you guys have beautifully preserved a lot of your scripts, a lot of your history, a lot of your, explanation on things, and you have preserved that to your culture until these days. So you
mm,
can talk about that. We didn't.
right.
Unfortunately, the Nazca religion is not extremely well described, but at least we have like a good chunk of it. Like maybe 60, 70% of the religion aspect of the Nazca culture is known. There are books. It's
Oh,
been,
is there?
yeah, yeah, because
Wow.
that's why being a historian in Peru, it's amazing. Like Bharat, Maria Reiche is from Germany, and she
Mhm.
came to Peru in 1940
Yeah.
in a time where these lines were not even a thing.
Right.
Do you imagine how many people have come to Peru after that or like these days?
Yeah. I wonder what made her come to Peru out of all the places.
That's true. I don't know
And
that.
you know what? Like now that you mention and now that you're talking about it, it's coming to me that Germany and there's a like it's not too uncommon for people from Germany, Europe, to travel to India and learn different, you know, be educated in different subjects, you know. And this has been going on for like centuries, like way back when. I'm wondering what made her go to Peru out of all the places. Because she's not just a mathematician. She studied languages,
Hmm.
right? She was a linguist, I guess. Um, she
Maybe.
studied languages and math. You know, doing this, like digging that 4 to 6 inches, for hundreds of kilometers. Um, I'm sure it wasn't a one man's job, right? It was probably like, a lot of people coming together. There is a sense of community there, and there's a sense of, um, like a deeper understanding and deeper connection to people, community, and also life on a grander scale. Like, I mean, these Nazca lines, they teach us that, right? Like, you can't even see it when you're in it, when you're
Yeah.
walking by it. You could only see it from what, hundreds and thousands of feet up in the air. Only then can you have this view. And there's, and
Yeah.
some of them are very simple figures, so to speak, in a sense that simple as in, they're just like, oh, it's just monkeys or spider or something that's like so part of our just common vocabulary, if anything, because like,
Mhm.
oh yeah, we could just Google and monkey picture would come up, or like you just turn on a TV and you would see it. But there's just something, a deeper connection. They had some sort of reverence to this
Yeah.
clearly, and dedication, because to do that in a desert, I don't think it's a walk in the park, right?
No, it's a walk in the desert.
Exactly. Yeah.
So going back to Maria Reiche, talking about dedication here, right? Apparently, she didn't go to Peru to study the Nazca lines at first. She arrived, and I think you were sort of right. She arrived in the 1930s. She arrived as a German mathematician and teacher. She was working in Lima, apparently as a governess and translator. So her trip was more about work and opportunity, not exploration.
Ah, I see.
Um, yeah. And apparently everything changed when she met Paul Kosok, an American researcher studying the lines. And he invited her to help because she had a strong knowledge on maths and measurement skills. And so she could assist with mapping and analyzing the lines, right? So apparently that's how she first visited the Nazca Desert. And of course, why did she stay? Well, she became deeply fascinated about the lions, and decided to dedicate her life to them. She spent decades living in the desert. She measured, she mapped all these hundreds and hundreds of figures and lines, and protect them from damage.
Mhm.
Uh, she, like I mentioned, she was actually, like we can see in this picture, she was sweeping them herself.
Mhm.
Like that's not like a joke. Like she really was sweeping the lines to preserve them from
Right.
damage.
Yeah.
So her legacy is enormous. She helped prove the lines had scientific and cultural importance. She promoted the idea of astronomical alignments as a theory behind these lines, and she played a huge role in getting the site recognized by UNESCO. So she's amazing. She's a national non-Peruvian treasure.
Yeah. Maybe she is Peruvian too.
Maybe she is Peruvian.
She just happened to be born in Germany.
There you go. Yeah.
Because, she lived in Peru much longer than she did in Germany, right?
Yeah, probably. Yeah. 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 Insert alien music here.
Yeah. I was thinking more like, yeah,
Oh,
go on.
The final theory is that these lines were made by aliens. That it's a theory that a lot of you guys out there support and love talking about. Um, and sometimes I have encountered people, talking in podcasts, shows about this alien theory for like an hour and saying Maria Reiche for like 2 seconds. So, to entertain your theory of the aliens um, being the ones behind all of this, yes, hard to believe humans are able to, make all this happen. People say that if that was the case, if humans were the ones behind all these lines, they would have taken around like 300 years or 400 years to complete all these lines that we see, um, that we know of as of today. So apparently, making all these lines would have taken so long, like 300 years, 400 years, that it's kind of hard to believe this was made by humans. So the other theory is that the aliens made it, or that we were trying to communicate with these gods that were coming from above, that could have been aliens. Um, so yeah, we have seen other parts of the world making all this. Have you seen the ground circles that have appeared in other part of the world? Like I think
Oh,
the
the crop
cornfields,
circles?
the crop circles. That's the word. I'm so sorry.
Oh no, it's okay.
I'm so sorry, senor.
No worries,
English
no worries.
not my first language.
So
Okay.
good. In my
So
country? Yeah.
in my they might have had some, relation with aliens, trying to communicate with them, or the aliens made all these lines to kind of like know, okay, you know what? Um, I'm making this hummingbird, I'm making this monkey because these are the species that exist in this planet. So I'm gonna report them, I'm gonna just record all of these findings on the earth, right? So, you know, I have mapped a lot of things in this planet, and I'm gonna record everything like a stamp on Earth, like a stamp on the ground. Maybe that's why they did it. But yeah, I mean, it's something that has been talked before.
Yeah. I wouldn't rule it out. But then again, I think it's just like looking what is alien, right? Like
Mm.
if you know something long enough, if you're in contact with it long enough, and since this civilization, these folks, the Aska folks, um, if they were already reaching the altered states of consciousness and getting in touch with these beings or their dimensions in one way or another, is it really alien for them?
Well, this was a fascinating conversation. I think that we didn't delve too much on this, but maybe like an ending, we can just say it. Amazing how other people, right, from other countries will come to your country and change the game.
Mm.
Um, they will just dedicate their whole life. They will only work on this. Because I mean, this means a lot to them, I guess, but they might also imagine how much that means also to us because they're working on something that will stay in our land and that
Yeah.
will mean a lot to us. And she dedicated, Maria Rich dedicated her whole life to that. Such a
Hmm.
great gift. And we
Yeah.
talk about the word gift um, in our first episode, actually.
Mm.
A name can be a gift, and
Indeed.
this big actions, like her sweeping all these lines herself
Yeah.
in the desert.
Yeah.
But that was such a great gift, and we're still talking about this thanks to her, yes, and also thanks to all the people that made this possible, that we might not be naming today, maybe we have, but
Yeah.
it's thinking about all this work, right? How humans can come together,
Hmm.
forgetting about races, forgetting about where they were born, forgetting about
Hmm.
all those demarcations that we have built in life,
Yeah.
and just coming together for one single same purpose, and that is preserving culture.
Yeah. Yeah. And shout out to your dad for appreciating Maria Rach
Yeah.
and giving you that little brush so that you can bring it with you to the states, and there you go. And these tiny little things, and making it a daily reality. For somebody, like, that brush might mean nothing, but for
Mm.
you, because of this story and this connection, like, it means a lot, you
Yeah,
know. And it makes all the difference. And you know eh, it's not just that, like, we're bashing people from elsewhere all the time, but we could also appreciate people, and we could also appreciate the gifts that they bring, and their contributions and things of that nature, because in one way or another they're still uh, carving or making a way for the future in one way or another.
I think that this would mean a lot to a lot of Peruvians. That's why I want to hear it from you. Um, we have been told, and this is our reality, unfortunately, that we haven't fully recovered our self esteem after the Spaniards game. And that's something that, people will see at certain degree how that still is a reality or not. We have, you know, a lot mix of cultures in Peru, but it's been reported that we haven't recovered much from that. So I think one question I want to ask you is, um, do you think it's nice to be a Peruvian? Like,
It
look at
is
all.
amazing. Are you kidding me? I think the fact that you have these wonderful things, like, I would be super proud. I'd flaunt this. I'd probably buy t-shirts with these designs and rock them like it's my business, you know? Um, so maybe yeah, let's start a merch, and see if those some of those proceeds can go to the Nazca Lines, and restoring Peruvian heritage and culture and things of that nature. And and another really, really cool thing, uh, this is, I guess, on a personal note, that you've sent the other day when you traveled to Peru recently, and when you were there, you sent a picture from there, and this was at a school art competition,
Yeah,
and the first, second, third prizes, like, you shared a picture of, like, the first, second, third winners
yeah.
of what they drew. And could you shine a little bit more light on that? What that was about?
I was just walking in Miraflores. That is a very known district where you can find tons of tourists. There's so many hotels there. And the main park is called the Kennedy Park or Parque Kennedy. So you can find a lot of things in that park, and one of them is that sometimes you can find some art exhibitions that are just very casual, some like street art exhibitions.
Mm.
uh, and this is a work that it's hand to hand with the mayor from that district. So one of the things they did is that they run a competition in one of the many high schools or schools in that district, and the theme of this art competition was to draw something or paint, you know create a painting about the Indian culture as inspiration. So I was not expecting that at all. It's not something that you see every day.
Mhm.
I've seen some little small exhibitions, galleries about other topics, but it was so beautiful. It was so nice to me when I saw that because, you know, us existing and us talking about what we're talking about now, you coming from India, me coming from Peru, it's me also trying to work on this statement of, you can come from the other side of the world and we can still be friends and we can still,
Mhm.
come together and just talk about Peru or Indian food and have fun. And that there's more similarities than differences at the end of the day.
Yeah.
So me walking by with my brother and seeing all these paintings was very, very emotional, very nice. It was kind of like, wow, maybe I was right. You know, there's a connection. There is this kind of like passion for other cultures. We have this appreciation, and we have a huge respect, appreciation to the Indian culture in Peru.
Mhm.
Uh, Even if you are not familiar with that, that's the
Yeah,
case. And I think that this is a beautiful representation of that.
that's amazing because I see the appreciation as a you know um, bunch of Peruvians coming together and appreciating Indian culture. But I'm also, when you were when I saw that picture and as you're talking about it, like some pictures, I guess is flashing into my mind. It's like this one little kid after school. They're spending their time painting about a whole nother culture, literally like giving their life to this painting, um, spending their evening or however long it took them, maybe weeks, who knows, right? And their whole, like their families gathering around, asking them questions, or like maybe just telling them about the culture or the stories that they've heard. And
And
maybe,
that's exactly what Maria Reiche did.
yeah,
And you tie it together, it's like, what a beautiful way to see it, right?
yeah, the stories coming together, people talking about it, sharing their perspectives and what they learned and how we're all connected and making each other's lives richer.
That's
Um,
what I'm trying to say here. You mentioned something beautiful. You know, the kids, we're talking about 12-year-old, 13-year-old kids, and they were dedicating their evenings for these paintings.
yeah,
So, to these paintings. So, Maria Rach did the same thing, right?
yeah,
We dedicated evenings, afternoons, days and months and years to preserve and, learn more about a culture
yeah,
that is not even hers, that is not even this Peruvian kids' culture, but they did it with passion, with dedication, and with love.
yeah. And that paved the path to more discoveries and more, uh, more explorations. And seems like there is a deeper exploration and discoveries. Right now, they're saying that the one of the picture is titled like scientists say that the Nazca lines carved into Peru's deserts are 2,000 years old, so on and so forth, and like there's much more. They're discovering more figures, more lines, and the story, the depth is revealed as we go into the future. And I'm
And you
I'm
said something.
curious. Yeah, I'm curious as to like what those books talk about, these structures or like the symbols, so to speak. Yeah, go ahead.
Man, there's so many books like in English. You can find them online. You can download them. Fortunately, slash fortunately, some of them are for free because
Mm,
it's that level of I care, I guess.
mhm.
Yeah, so you can find them very easily.
Nice.
Um,
So some reading for
yeah,
the
for myself
listeners
as well.
and
Yeah,
myself.
yeah, yeah. I
Thank
bought
you.
this book that is called The Incas Empire, and that is the story of the Incas being told by the historians and all the records that we have so far. Either way, yeah, the part with that, the controversial part is that we have records on the Incas culture. The only thing is that those records were made by Spaniards,
Mhm.
so there's always this bias, right?
Right. Yeah.
We are told telling the story to kids in Peruvian schools based on what we have from Spaniards, which could be
Right. Yeah.
okay. That'll be the case.
That's I'm glad you mentioned that because a lot of the times, and this is happening with Indian history as I've learned. also,
Oh,
right? Like when I
interesting.
was growing up in India, we learned history from a certain lens and from select authors or select curators. But as I'm learning more, as I'm reading more,
Yeah,
I'm learning a bigger, wider truth, which may not necessarily settle well with me. Like
yeah,
some people that I looked up to had these sites that I didn't know they had. Because when I was younger, I was looking up to them as like, you know, they had like godly qualities, but now not so much. Very human, and sometimes some aspects that I'm not even able to digest,
yeah.
you know, and then some controversial things are coming up also. So I'm like, oh boy, I don't know how I feel about this, you
That's
know. But it's very important to know that because there might be some aspects in our lives that we might discover later on. It might even be about somebody from our own family tree that we haven't heard of, and then now like we have to take the good with the bad or the bad with the good, so on and so forth, and learn from those stories and someone else's mistakes, so to speak, right? And it could, there's so many layers to it. Um, so yeah, there's a lot to dig into if we choose to. But for now, we'll leave it at that. We appreciate you sharing all that you have and honoring all the, all the people that have dedicated their life and life's efforts in preserving culture, um, and keeping it alive in this day and age when they could be doing a whole bunch of other things um, that are more that are more novel in nature. But I think the um, the past and the history, it brings depth and
yeah.
richness to our present life.
I was about to say, going back to that painting that we talk about, you can only imagine how that kid was like, "Hey, who am I painting now? Oh,
Yeah,
that's Lord Shiva. Oh, that's Lord Brahma, or this is this event in Hinduism. Oh, interesting.
yeah,
Okay." And then, 10 years from now, right? It's like, "Hey, I won second place as this, art competition. Oh, really? What did you draw? Oh, I drew this god from India. Interesting. How's it called? Lord Shiva. Oh, great. What do you know about it? Um, Not much actually. Let me look it up." Then, you know,
yeah.
it's
And
that
the
effect,
story builds.
And the story builds. And the
Yeah.
story builds. And then 40 years from now, it's like when I was 12 years old, I drew Lord Shiva, who happens to be and
Mm. And
it's
then,
beautiful.
yeah, and later on, when I was 25, I learned, I met my Indian wife.
Right, right.
So you never know where life takes you, right?
So it was kind of like a full circle moment because we were just talking about the lines and the paintings, and I was like picturing, Maria Reiche, working on those lines, sweeping them off, and then also the Incas or the Nazca culture working on the lines, and also that 12-year-old kid working on those traces and lines for that painting. So it was kind of like I was pictured them doing that, and
Mm.
it was so beautiful. It was kind of like someone from Peru, Germany, and had kind of like getting together. It's like, wow, I don't know, it was something that I pictured in that moment when we were talking about that. It was like, wow, it was kind of meant to be that I saw that art exhibition, I guess. I don't know.
Yeah. No, uh, it's so amazing. I feel like I'm in a movie or I'm kind of seeing like a future movie story being unfolded right in front of my eyes as you talk about it. Very cool. Thanks for
Yeah,
sharing that.
absolutely.
Yeah. And it's not just say geography, right? It's also life,
Yeah,
dedication. Like Maria Reiche's life shows that, she's willing to share her life with it,
yeah,
with others who are not necessarily from where she is.
Yeah.
or where she was born and brought up.
Yeah.
And and there's some similar stories in other parts of the world. People and their work, they gives hope, you
Yeah.
know. And I think that's something that we could all use in this day and age during these
Absolutely.
times. um, Coming together and hoping for a better world, and creating a better world, whatever way we can,
I'm
even if
okay
that
with.
means with a little brush or
Yeah.
paintbrush or whatever that may be.
Exactly. I am okay with not knowing what these lines actually mean. And I will take as a trade off that, you know, what they symbolize, because at the end of the day, all these aspects that we have talked about, they do are still part of what they mean, right?
Right.
They
Yeah.
are part of their meaning,
Yeah.
what they mean for us. Sometimes,
That's
yeah, it's hard to believe how, and because maybe today is election day, right? How we can just create so many divisions among us Peruvians. And if we just sit down to talk and remember all of these amazing things that we have as part of our history and culture and identity, it's so, so incredible. It's like
mhm.
all these lines, such a staple, right?
Yeah.
And what they mean to us, I think, is the most important thing.
And I really like what you touched on. It's like, um, I don't mind not knowing what these lines mean,
Yeah,
and the fact that we're talking about it, and then what these lines mean to us,
yeah.
for the listener, for myself, for you. I'm sure it means something, and maybe you'll continue discovering those meanings as
Hmm.
as we journey on in life. Very, very cool.
Well, thank you so much for this conversation.
Thank you. Thank you. And thanks to the listener for giving their precious time to this particular topic, and wishing everyone a wonderful day and life ahead.
Have a wonderful day. Have a wonderful life. If something comes up and you don't like it, remember about the lions that at the end of the
Yeah.
day, it's not that deep and
Yeah.
you can always brush it off.
That's right.